Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something, well, really fundamental to our well-being. The trillions of bacteria living in our gut.
Mhm.
You've probably heard people talk about good bacteria and bad bacteria, but what if that's just, way too simple?
It often is.
What if these tiny microbes are actually more like microbial shapeshifters? Their behavior changing drastically depending on the environment they're in.
That's exactly the core idea we're exploring today.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this fascinating report that really digs into this dynamic inner world. It highlights just how adaptable these gut microbes truly are.
Exactly. So our mission here is to get beyond those simple good-bad labels. We want to really understand what makes a gut bacterium helpful or, harmful.
And the key takeaway,
It seems to be that the context, the environment inside us is pretty much everything.
it really is.
So if you've ever found gut health advice may be a bit confusing, or
Mhm.
if that whole good bacteria story felt, I don't know, incomplete, this deep dive is for you.
We're looking into how our microbes adapt, their plasticity, and what that means for your health.
Yeah, we're going to break down why your own gut environment is basically the conductor of this whole microbial orchestra.
And it's crucial to realize we're not just passive bystanders in this. Our bodies, our physiology, our lifestyle choices, even our genetics, they actively shape these microbes.
So we're influencing them constantly.
Constantly. Think of it like the terrain of your gut. All those host factors create the conditions, the environment. That dictates how microbes behave and what they actually do.
Okay, let's unpack this terrain idea then. A big part of that has to be what we eat, right? Our diet.
Absolutely fundamental.
It seems obvious that food fuels microbes, but the report really stresses how dramatically diet can shift, whether a microbe acts like a friend or maybe more like a foe.
Or somewhere in between. Yeah, diet provides the primary substrates, the fuel, for microbial growth. So it makes sense. It has a really fast and significant impact on both the types of bacteria we have and what they're doing, their functions.
And when you talk about modern diets, you almost have to talk about ultra-processed foods, UPFs.
You really do. They're so prevalent.
UPS, yeah. Those, convenient, often very tasty foods that make up a huge chunk of many people's diets nowadays. The report mentions the no VA classification. Can you give us a quick rundown on what UPFs are according to that?
Sure. So NoVA classifies foods based on their level of processing. We're really zooming in on group 4, the ultra-processed foods.
Okay.
These aren't just processed, they're industrial formulations, often made from substances extracted or synthesized, lots of additives, very little actual whole food.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Oh, things like sugary breakfast cereals, most packaged snacks, soft drinks, mass-produced breads, ready meals, that kind of thing.
Got it. So it's not just that they might be low on nutrients, they're actually designed in a specific way. The report uses the term bliss point. Sounds deliberate.
Oh, it's very deliberate. Food science has perfected this. UPFs are often engineered to hit that bliss point, a carefully calculated combination of sugar, fat, and salt, to maximize pleasure. It basically hijacks our natural satiety signals, the cues that tell us we're full. The goal is to make them hyperpalatable, almost irresistible, driving overconsumption. People like Howard Moskowitz did a lot of work figuring this out.
Wow. It's like they're bypassing our body's own controls.
Pretty much.
The report even mentions how they activate reward pathways in the brain, dopamine, opioids, similar to how addictive substances work.
Exactly. That contributes to compulsive eating patterns. And then there's this concept mentioned, vanishing caloric density.
Yeah, what's that?
It's a sensory trick. Some UPFs, like certain puff snacks, dissolve really quickly in the mouth. It gives the sensation of consuming fewer calories than you actually are.
Sneaky.
It can definitely trick you into eating more, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all part of overriding those natural hunger and fullness cues.
Well, it's hardly surprising then that these foods are linked to so many health problems. The report lists some really serious consequences if UPFs dominate your diet,
Oh, absolutely.
like pushing out healthier whole foods
Which lowers overall diet quality, definitely.
and increasing the risk for metabolic diseases, obesity, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, NAFLD, or I think it's often called MASLD now.
Right. Metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, yes. Strong links there. And things like high fructose corn syrup play a significant role in liver fat accumulation.
How so?
Well, fructose is metabolized differently, mainly in the liver in a way that promotes fat storage, de novo lipogenesis, and it can worsen insulin resistance. The report even points out that fructose can directly inhibit key enzymes involved in cellular energy production.
Really? Like which ones?
It mentions things like AMP kinase, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain, CPT1, basically messing with our cells' ability to generate energy efficiently from fats.
And it's not just metabolic stuff, is it? The report also touched on hormones.
Yes, potential hormonal disruption too. It might worsen insulin resistance in conditions like PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, which can increase ovarian testosterone production.
Right.
And there's even suggestion it could exacerbate menopausal symptoms like hot flashes or sleep problems. It paints a picture of really widespread systemic effects.
It really does. And that's just the main ingredients. We haven't even properly talked about the additives yet. This seems crucial for the gut terrain.
Hugely important. Beyond the sugar, fat, and salt, the sheer number and combination of additives in UPFs can really impact the gut environment, often negatively.
Right. Let's get into those. Emulsifiers were mentioned, things like CMC, polysorbate 80, carrageenan 2. Are these actually a big deal?
Well, in the context of regular high consumption in UPFs, the research is concerning. The report suggests they can damage that protective mucus layer lining our gut.
Thin it out.
Yeah, potentially thin it out, maybe encourage bacteria that degrade the mucus and increase intestinal permeability.
That's the leaky gut idea.
Exactly. That increased permeability can allow bacterial components to cross into the bloodstream, triggering pro-inflammatory responses. Animal studies have linked CMC and polysorbate 80 to dysbiosis, an imbalance in gut microbes, and even colitis in susceptible models.
And carrageenan.
It's also been flagged for potential adverse gastrointestinal effects and stimulating inflammation. Some researchers think it might even play a role in food allergies or inflammatory diseases.
That's quite a list. What about artificial sweeteners? People often swap sugar for those, thinking it's healthier.
Yeah, but the idea that they're metabolically inert just doesn't seem to hold up. The report highlights evidence that they can alter the gut microbiota.
Oh.
Well, by changing the bacterial balance, they might actually impair glucose tolerance in some people, contributing to metabolic dysregulation. Studies have linked saccharin, for example, with dysbiosis and increased glucose intolerance.
So, potentially counterproductive for managing blood sugar.
Potentially, yes. And while direct effects on things like histamine processing aren't fully confirmed, if they cause dysbiosis, they could indirectly mess with histamine levels by changing the bacteria that produce or degrade it, or by increasing gut permeability.
Okay. And then there are all the others: artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, stabilizers. It's a chemical cocktail sometimes.
It really can be. And while each additive might be tested individually, the report voices concern about the cumulative and interactive effects of consuming this whole mix chronically.
What kind of effects?
Potential contributions to systemic inflammation, further microbiome disruption. The long-term impacts, especially starting in childhood, are still being understood, but are a real area of concern.
Wow. So it really sounds like UPFs deliver kind of double whammy.
How do you mean?
Well, they seem to directly harm our metabolic health through the sugar, fat, unhealthy fats maybe, and refined carbs. And at the same time, they're damaging the gut environment itself through the lack of whole ingredients and all these additives.
That's a perfect summary. The report really emphasizes this feed-forward cycle. UPFs harm metabolic health directly, and they degrade the gut terrain, causing dysbiosis, reducing microbial diversity, increasing leakiness, promoting inflammation.
Which then feeds back and makes the metabolic problems even worse.
Precisely. It becomes a vicious cycle. And that's why simply telling someone to, say, just cut calories when their diet is full of UPFs might be completely missing the point.
Because it ignores the damage to the terrain.
Exactly. It ignores these profound terrain-altering effects. This really reinforces the need for what the report calls a terrain-focused healing approach. It's not just about the calories, it's about the quality and the impact on your internal ecosystem.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about what might damage the terrain. What about building a healthier one? Fiber always comes up.
It does, and for good reason. Fiber is incredibly important for gut health and overall health.
Yeah.
But
There's always a but, isn't there?
well, the report points out that the fiber story is more nuanced than just eat more roughage. Context is key here, too.
Okay. The report mentions something called the fiber paradox. What's that about?
It's this observation that as UPF consumption goes up in populations, overall dietary fiber intake tends to go down.
Ah, because UPS generally don't have much natural fiber.
Exactly. The processing itself often removes or degrades the fiber that was originally in the whole food ingredients. So when UPFs displace whole foods in the diet, fiber intake naturally drops. One Swiss study mentioned showed most adults are already below the recommended intake, and there's this inverse relationship with UPF consumption.
Right. And the fiber you do find in some UPFs might not be the same as the fiber in, say, vegetables or beans. The report distinguishes between whole food fiber and addicilated fibers.
Yes, and that's a critical distinction. Fiber from whole foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains isn't just one thing. It's a complex mixture of different types, soluble and insoluble, all embedded within the food's natural structure, the matrix.
Which also contains vitamins, minerals.
Phytochemicals, exactly. This whole package supports digestion, helps regulate blood sugar, promotes satiety, and crucially, it's the primary food source for many beneficial gut microbes.
Leading to those SCFAs, the short-chain fatty acids.
Right, like butyrate, propionate, acetate. These have tons of benefits, both locally in the gut, like nourishing colon cells and supporting barrier integrity, and systemically influencing immunity and metabolism.
Okay, so that's whole food fiber. What about the fiber added to UPFs, like inulin in a yogurt or added fiber in a cereal bar?
So these are typically isolated fibers. Think inulin, chicory root extract, soluble corn fiber, polydextrose. Sometimes maltodextrin gets classified functionally as a fiber. There are often single types of fiber added to allow a specific health claim on the packaging.
Like high fiber.
Exactly, or maybe something more specific. The FDA might approve a fiber like inulin based on evidence for, say, improving calcium absorption, or psyllium for promoting regularity.
But they might not provide all the other benefits of the whole food fiber complex.
That's the concern. They lack the broad spectrum of benefits you get from diverse fibers in a whole food matrix. Consumers might expect general benefits like improved regularity or feeling fuller, but an isolated fiber might not deliver that or might only provide one specific narrow benefit. Cellulose, for example, adds bulk, but isn't well fermented.
So maybe unmet expectations sometimes. And how do these different fiber types affect the microbes?
Well, the diversity of fibers in whole foods tends to support a more diverse and resilient gut microbiome. Different microbes specialize in degrading different types of fiber.
Makes sense.
If you're mainly consuming one or two types of isolated fiber added to UPFs, you might be selectively feeding only certain bacterial populations. This could potentially lead to lower overall diversity and maybe not foster the same functional balance or resilience in the ecosystem. Again, the UPF processing itself often destroys the natural fiber matrix anyway.
And then there's the tolerance issue. Not everyone handles fiber the same way, do they?
Not at all. The report really highlights this. Fiber tolerance is very individual. It depends heavily on your baseline microbiome, what bacteria you already have, how sensitive your gut is generally, and of course the type and amount of fiber you eat.
Some people get gas or bloating.
Yes, exactly. Some individuals can experience significant discomfort, gas, bloating, abdominal pain, especially with certain fermentable fibers like inulin or FOS, fructooligosaccharides, even at doses considered moderate.
And the benefits aren't always guaranteed either. I remember reading about a study mentioned where high fiber helped inflammation in some, but maybe slightly worsened it in others.
That's right. It underscores that even for a generally beneficial nutrient like fiber, the effect isn't uniform. It depends on the individual's starting point, their existing gut terrain. A high fiber intervention might dampen inflammation if the terrain is primed for it, but if the existing microbiome isn't well suited to those fibers, it could potentially have a less positive or even slightly negative inflammatory effect initially.
Wow. So that really complicates the simple eat more fiber message, doesn't it?
It does. When you factor in the fiber paradox, the potentially limited benefits and even intolerance issues with some addicilated fibers, and this context-dependent effect on things like inflammation, it shows we need a more nuanced approach.
So relying on fiber-fortified UPFs is probably not the best strategy.
It can be misleading. You're missing out on the synergistic benefits of the whole food matrix. You might not get the diversity of fiber types needed for a robust microbiome, and you're still consuming the UPF itself with potentially negative ingredients. Plus, it might displace truly nutrient-dense, naturally fibrous whole foods from the diet.
It really reinforces that idea of focusing on the source and the quality.
Absolutely. Prioritizing diverse, whole, unprocessed, or minimally processed plant foods for fiber aligns perfectly with that terrain-focused approach we've been talking about. It values the holistic benefits.
So just adding fiber back into a processed food doesn't really make it a whole food again.
Not even close. The quality, the source, the food matrix, these are paramount. Public health messaging really should emphasize fiber from whole food sources,
Yeah.
not inadvertently suggest that fiber-fortified UPFs are an equivalent substitute.
Okay, let's try and summarize the main thread here then. It seems really clear that just slapping a good or bad label on gut bacteria is, well, insufficient. It misses the whole picture.
Completely. Their
Right.
behavior, their function, their impact on us, it's largely dictated by the environment we create for them inside our gut. That terrain is the key determinant.
And our diet plays a massive role in shaping that terrain, especially the rise of UPFs with all their additives, their specific engineering, their lack of natural fiber, seems to have a significant and often negative impact.
A very significant impact, yes. And conversely, while fiber is definitely vital, it's not just about quantity. The type of fiber, the source whole foods versus isolated additives matters tremendously. Relying on fortified processed foods just doesn't cut it.
Which all points towards needing a more personalized and context-aware way to support gut health, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's about cultivating that healthy internal environment, nurturing the terrain, rather than just trying to, parachute in specific good bugs and hope for the best. It's truly about terrain-focused healing.
That perspective shift feels really important.
I think it is.
This has been incredibly insightful, really peeling back the layers on that complex world inside us. So final thought for you listening. When you realize just how profound an influence your daily choices, especially your food choices, have on this bustling microbial universe within you, well, how might that deeper awareness of your inner ecosystem empower you?
How could it help you make more informed decisions about diet, about lifestyle, aiming for better long-term health, better resilience?
Yeah. Maybe think about it this way. What's one small change you could make starting today to actively, consciously cultivate a healthier gut terrain? Something to mull over.
Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.